Hey folks, this time I wanted to talk to you about a new box project I've really been enjoying. This is a sliding box with a magnetic top, and it's got a nice shape to it. You can hold a lot of good stuff in it, and you can use some really nice thin woods that you might have lying around for the top. If you've got, half-inch thick pieces of really nice stuff. This is a curly or quilted maple for the top and a walnut bottom. If you're just using 3/4 material, you can come up with slightly smaller boxes. And again, same sliding principle. This one is cherry and maple, and I had a buddy of mine do some laser engraving on top of it, and that turned out really well. But I've been really pleased with this. Most of you who's been following me know that I have a thing about boxes, so figured I'd show you how to make this one next in Carbide Create. So here are the magnets we're going to use for our project. These are about 1/4 of an inch square and a little over 1/8 of an inch thick, and they'll just slot down into our wood. They've got a really good strong grab. I get these off of eBay, and I will put a link down the doobly-doo to some of these. They're probably about 50 of them for maybe $6-8. They're not very expensive at all, and they're really good and fun to work with for box projects especially. Okay, so our two woods for the project are going to be these. The thin piece for the top is a nice piece of bubinga that's got some really pretty grain structure to it, and I think that'll make a nice interesting top. And because I want this to be kind of the feature of the thing, I'm going to go ahead and use something a little less eye-catching, this just regular piece of maple for the bottom. This one is probably about 1.25 inches, maybe 1 1/3, something like that. But we'll get the measurements done for that. Typically with something like this, you want to cut a thicker piece so that you've got more room to put that pocket in. You'll be able to fit more things in the box when you're done. But you can cut these out of 3/4 if you want. Again, I showed you one earlier that was a little bit thinner. Just keep in mind you can't keep quite as much stuff in it. So these are 2 pieces of wood. Let's go ahead and set this up in Carbide Create. Okay, so in Carbide Create, we're going to start with our job setup here. Now, my maple piece was considerably bigger, but I'm going to start here with the width measurements of my bubinga here, just to make sure that when I go into my design area, that I don't end up designing something wider than my lid can be. Now, I set my stock thickness to the 1.3 of the maple piece. There's going to be some special considerations when we're cutting anything this thick, and I'll touch on those in a little bit. But that's essentially how thick our maple piece is that we'll be dealing with. And I'm going to design both of these things in one file just because it's a little easier to track and keep things straight, that you're making the same size pieces. Hopefully it won't be too confusing. We're going to set this to lower left, hardwood, again whatever your machine is, and my retract height I usually keep to about 2 millimeters because I know my board has been flattened recently. So let's work with that. Okay, to start with, I'm going to give us a box of about 2.5 by 4.5. This is the one I've done before, and that tends to work out fairly well. I'm also going to give us a slight fillet to this and tell it okay. And that may be a little bit much on the fillet. Let's do 2.5. Yeah, that's a little better. Okay. So that'll give us nice rounded pieces on our box. Now we also want to have our main cutout here. So I'm going to do another one of these. And just from past experimentation, I'm going to go about 1/7 and about 3.8. 8. And the fillet on this one, I'm going to do 1, 2, 5 because I know that'll get into the corners with my 1/4 inch bit. Okay, so that's got those. And then I'm going to select both. I'm going to align them both to the stock and center them. Twink. So that means I've got everything centered. Okay, now this is going to give us the outside of our box and the inside of our pocket. Everything else is going to feed off of that size right there. So the first thing I'm going to add here is I'm going to add my magnets. Now these are just something that I keep that's not going to work. Function delete. Alright, let's try this again. Okay, so we're going to do these at a width of 305 and a height of 1.3. And this is something I know by trial and error. I'm not going to worry about any kind of fillet for those. And they just go kind of in between these two places. And snap to grid sometimes gets irritating. And we'll just do that. Then we'll copy. And we'll drag this one down. Set the view. Drag this one down here. Okay. Now, one thing I still want to do is I want to select these guys and this guy, and I want to make sure that they're centered this way in there. So from our alignment tools, in this case we're going to align to our last selection, which is this one with the dotted line, and do that. Okay, and that makes sure that those are going to be centered, and we can use those magnet points for both our top and our bottom. Okay, so now we've got that piece done. Now the other pieces that we're going to need are basically the pocket for our slide, right? So that is the little piece that allows this to slide back and forth. We want to make it slightly bigger than this inner pocket so that the box top has something to slide on. Okay, so now we need a new rectangle, and I'm going to make this one 2 by about 4.6, right? Okay, so now what this is going to give us is a little room on either side. Okay, so I want to align that one to this. Okay, now this is going to be where we route out for the sliding portion of the box. So we're going to go a little bit deeper here on our maple piece. Now this is going to get a little bit confusing since I'm trying to do this for both the top and the bottom. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this guy, copy, and then I want to set him to be let's go with a width of about 0.3. Let's see if that works. Yeah, okay. Now I'm going to take the midpoint of him, drag him over to that, copy him, grab midpoint, lock him to that. Now, this looks a little odd, but what it's going to let us do is this. I'm going to select this guy and carve out the channel in the bottom. And then I'm going to select these two guys and use them to carve out the channels that will go on our top. Now we've actually got all the pieces that we need in order to make both the top and the bottom. Save that. And let me show you how this works from the toolpath selection. So for the toolpath, we're going to go ahead and select the things for our top, right? So our top is going to get this and this. cutout. And we're going to go down 1/4 of an inch on those. And we're going to use our 1/4 inch end mill. Alright, so we'll pocket those. Well, we don't necessarily need to pocket them, do we? Yeah, they're thin enough to where we can just go around the inside. So, top, slide. Okay, and if we mouse over, we'll see that it gets most of the stuff there. Yeah, now that definitely cuts out both of those things all the way around the length of this. And then I cut this outside, and I do him 0.5, was it 0.54, I believe. Okay, and I'm going to add some tabs for his cutout. Top, bottom. Set those to be about 5 millimeters wide. That's usually plenty for this. So, alright, top, cut out. Okay, so if I look at those just by themselves, I've got the cutout, that's going to be the round piece for my top, and then I've got the slide, which will be the 2 channels for my top. Now the other thing I'm going to need for my top, let's go ahead and rename this just because we can. Top. Okay, good. The other thing I'm going to need for my top is my magnets. And these are both so small that they're going to need to be cut with an 1/8 inch. So I'm going to select both of those. We're going to do contour inner, which is fine. We're going to do an 1/8 inch end mill. And I'm going to increase my speeds just a little bit because their depths are a little bit conservative for my taste. Okay, now these are going to be straight up from the surface, so they're going to be 0.26 deep, right? And just to remind me, if I can spell 1/8. Okay, so that is our top completely, right? Now I'm going to create us a new tool group for our bottom, which I'm going to name appropriately bottom, because I am oh so creative. Okay, now our bottom needs to have this area cut out, right, so it matches our slides from the top. So I'm going to select this guy, which goes down our center, and I'm going to do a contour cut pocket, and I'm going to go down 1/4 of an inch to match what we're doing on our tops. And I'm going to call this bottom slide. Okay, and need to remember to change my bit. Okay, alright, so now I've got a nice pocket for that one, right? So that's going to cut the pocket out of our bottom. Now, got a couple of things we're going to do here. We're going to cut our pocket that goes all the way down, and we're going to cut that one contour, pocket. We're going to cut that one down. Now I'm just going to cut it down about an inch. I'm going to call this main pocket. Now, one thing to note is my bit has about 1 inch of cutting length. If I go down much further than that, I'm going to start burning things with the wood because those sides are going to develop a lot of friction. So in this particular case, I'm fine with it because my bottom slide has already cut 1/4 inch out, right? So this, I actually need to start it, otherwise it's just going to be kind of waving in the air. So I need to start my depth at 2.5. And then it's going to go down to that depth, right? So that's got those two. So one thing I need to think about when I'm cutting my magnets, I'm going to probably cut them first so this pocket will not be cut out at that point. So it will start at the top. So if I do that, my start depth will be 0, and then I'm going to cut them down. Since I've got 1/4 inch plus, I'm doing 0.51. And that should get me about as deep as I need for those. We're going to use an 1/8 inch end mill for this, and that should be fine. Okay, so that's got my bottom magnets. And then we're also going to do the cutout. And with the cutout, since I only have about 1 inch of cutting space, you've got a couple of choices. You can either use thinner material, or you can plan on only going down about 1 inch and then cutting the rest out on the bandsaw, which is what I'm going to do in this particular case. I'm going to go outside. I'm not going to bother with tabs because I'm going to have 1/4 inch of material left over. So I don't need to necessarily bother with any tabs. Bottom cut out. Remember to change your bit or things will go badly. So that's got our bottom cutout, our main pocket, and our slide for that. And now we get to make some sawdust. Okay, so I want to show you one of the other ways when you're cutting really thick material that this machine can really bite you. I'm going to do the homing sequence right now. Okay, this is as high as your bit is going to go, right? And if your material is a little higher, you're going to snap this bit off. One of the things that can fool you, though, is you can actually get the machine to go higher than this, right? So if I adjust up, I can get it to go higher than that. But when it's actually done with the cut, it's going to come back to that other point that it was at. And if you've zeroed out high to get over the top of your material, when it goes to make that final pass, when it comes out, it's going to be at this other depth that it thinks is 0. And it will tear right through whatever's in your project. So you have to make sure that once you do your homing, that your material will fit underneath here. Don't push this up further just to get your material over, because it will bite you in the fanny. Also, set 0, 0 all, done. Run, run, should pop up, cool. And as you can see from there, when it takes off and goes, you got to make sure those clamps are below this as well, otherwise it's going to eat one of these up, and that can make a mess of your day as well. So now we need to swap out bits and set things up again. Okay, so I've got my 1/4 inch bit in back there, and again, I want to sneak up on this because I'm not quite sure. This is going to be a longer bit. It's going to hang down lower, and I may very well run into one of my clamps if I'm not careful. So bring this forward slowly. Okay, cool, and it clears my clamps and it clears my workpiece. So I'm good. Now I can go to the rapid position and go to the current X and Y offset. And all I have to do is set my Z now. Using my wonderful touch probe. Okay, so now we've got the bottom of our box cut, and I'll need to take it and bandsaw out the last of it and probably do a little bit of cleanup on it, and I'll be ready to cut the lid. You notice we've got our nice little sliding spot here. We've got our 2 little rails that'll guide that lid on, and we've got our magnet holes in there. So that turned out fine. Okay, so here's my little piece of bubinga, and I'm going to put a piece of 1/4 inch MDF underneath just to keep it from dinging up my wasteboard too much. And when I look at this, I'm going to need to decide which side I like better, because the side that's facing down is going to be the one that is the top of the box. So to me, this has a little bit more interesting stuff going on here than this side. So I'm going to face that down and probably avoid that knot and put it over the other side. All right. So now we've got our lid. We've got our 2 pieces on the side, and we've got our 2 magnet points, and we should be able to just cut this out on the bandsaw and fit things together. Okay, so now we've got our box. Got a nice sliding movement here with it, and everything's sanded and fitted up pretty nice. The next thing we need to do is put our magnets on. And again, we're going to use 4 of these little guys. And really important that you get the polarity right on these. So what I tend to do is I start them in my top, push them down a little bit. You notice I've got them stacked here 2 up, right? So that way I know the polarity is right. And then I take them and just get them started. You don't need to shove them all the way down, but go ahead and use that to make sure you've got your polarity lined up. Press down a little bit, and you can kind of slide this out of the way. And then you take a tool of some kind and use it to shove those down until they're even with the surface. And now I have my box. Yay! Let's put some finish on this and see what the bubinga looks like.